Hey, everybody, welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are talking today about homeschooling. We're calling it Homeschooling 101 because right now we are in the midst of a global pandemic because of coronavirus, and there are millions of kids around the globe that are out of school. Schools have closed down here in the U.S., they've closed down in our area, and I have never been more thankful to teachers and educators, the people who are there doing their jobs every day and nurturing our kids and nurturing their brains, because now I'm looking at the next several weeks as a mom trying to figure out how I can keep their forward progress going in terms of their education and not let their brains basically turn to mush. So I've turned to my friend who is an expert in this topic. She graduated magna cum laude from the University of Texas at Dallas with a degree in economics and finance. She and her husband have 9 children between the ages of 2 and 26. And she has homeschooled her kids at home up until they are in 8th and 9th grade. Obviously not the younger ones. They're not there quite yet. But yes, she has done an amazing job raising her kids. Her kids have actually gone on and been offered presidential scholarships, academic scholarships to the various universities they've attended. So they're not just kind of coasting along as kids who are homeschooled. They have excelled tremendously in academics and socially as well. So I'm excited to introduce you to Heather Holland, who is joining us live to share her insight with us on homeschooling. Heather, thanks so much for joining That Expert Show.
Thank you for having me.
So you just emailed me some schedules that we will definitely be sharing on our various social media accounts. These are basically schedules that are suggestions for parents on what to do with their kids over these next several weeks. Can we start by talking about the concept of kind of emergency homeschooling and the type of materials that people might think about trying to gather right now to go about this process?
Sure. I really think that curriculum is the least of your worries at this point. So I don't want anybody to stress too much about that. I'm sure some kids have some things from their teachers as well. But I think the most important thing for moms to focus on is just creating a really happy atmosphere in the home. We have the internet. We have so much information at our fingertips that that's not really so much of a concern for us. I mean, there's so many things that we have available to us right now. So I would say, first of all, just don't even worry too much about that.
Okay, because it really can be intimidating as I go to think about, okay, how am I going to be the teacher to my kids over the next several weeks, and
Yeah,
developing a curriculum is a really intimidating word.
yeah, I would say this is a very unique time in our history, and I think I would treat it as such. I wouldn't try to do business as usual. I wouldn't try to pick up where your teachers left off. I think that we can be more creative than that. I think we can actually have a lot more fun than that. And that's not really expected of us by the school systems. My kids have been told specifically that they're not supposed to be working on homework over this period of time. So I know every school district is different. And so if they are giving you instruction to continue on with the homeschooling, then they're going to be giving you the information that you need. And I just want to encourage everybody with a study that was done a long time ago on a 10-year-old child. And I think it might have been multiple, but they took kids who had never been in an academic environment before in their life, but they had a healthy home upbringing. They had good food, healthy food. They had time outdoors, just a functional family life, but no academics whatsoever. And at the age of 10, that child was put into an academic situation, and they were able to learn in 4 months what all the other children had learned in school for from kindergarten to basically 5th grade.
Hmm.
So really, kids are not super ready for an academic environment until the ages of 8 to 10. And they've asked doctors of different specialties to evaluate children on their readiness for, like ophthalmologists with the classroom, like looking at the chalkboard, and neurologists. And independently, all the different specialists came up with the same age range of 8 to 10 years old as when a child is ready for like a rigorous academic environment.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So then let's talk about I guess the easiest way to go about it would be to think about by age group. So for kids who are younger and not ready to sit down for like a really rigorous at home academic regimen over the next few weeks, what would you suggest for parents? And I think there was actually on Facebook, Ariana wanted some suggestions on, what do I do with my preschooler? What are some ideas as far as the type of schedule that I should try to maintain throughout the day with my preschooler? So let's talk about maybe preschoolers up until first grade. Is that kind of a fair age group to break down?
Sure. Sure. And I have preschoolers, so that's something that I'm currently very familiar with. So first of all, for all of us, we start the day with quiet time. We know that preschoolers like to get up really early, and thankfully, we've instituted this for a long time. And so my girls know, they're 2 and 4 years old, that when they get up in the morning, it's quiet time. My 2-year-old still sleeps in a crib, and she honestly will stay in there and play. I'll bring her a bottle. I'll change her diaper. I'll give her toys in her crib, and she'll stay in there and she'll play for upwards of an hour. And with Ava, she'll stay in her room. She has, certain books that she looks at that time. So if you didn't get a chance to get up before your children, which I would highly recommend, it gives you a little bit of extra time to kind of like, okay, they're up now. I need to gear up and get ready for the day. And then typically after that, it's breakfast, encouraging them to help with the chores. I do think it's super important during this time that we teach our kids life skills that we may not normally have the time to teach them. So even a 4-year-old, even a 3-year-old can help load and unload the dishwasher. They might not be able to do it all, but I would try to really encourage them to do the things that you're normally doing if you were even by yourself during the day. And then after chores, the kitchen chores, maybe tidying up their room, and then just have, something that hopefully you've had a chance to plan before they've gotten up, worksheets that you've printed off online if they have the fine motor skills needed for that. I think I would educate myself if my kids were in preschool and I hadn't ever, taught them before. I would just kind of try to gear up by looking at what my expectations should be, because a lot of kids can't, practice writing letters, but you can take a cup of rice and you can put it in a shallow bowl and they can practice, with their finger and things like that. I mean, the amount of information out there in Pinterest is limitless. I think you'll find plenty of things that you can do. I think moving, you'll be surprised though at how quickly they lose interest. And so just being prepared that you need to have multiple activities for them. And then I did send Anna a great schedule that you can also look at, and it includes outside time for an hour, both in the morning and the afternoon, but creating some type of schedule that will work for your day ahead of time, even though you're not going to stick to it. You're going to make it, and then you're going to, get off track. I always found that I would still get so much more accomplished if I at least tried to have a schedule.
Off the top of your head, are there particular resources online that you have favored over the years that people can check out when it comes to advice
I'll
or
get
worksheets?
back to you on that one. It's been such a long time since I have a 4-year-old and then I have a 13-year-old. So I haven't done a whole lot of homeschooling currently, but I promise to get together a list of really good resources.
Ah, got it. So we will get that list from Heather, and we will include it in the tip sheet that we always create based on the episode, summarizing the key points of the episode and give you links to additional resources that might help people out. Again, I'll also share the schedule that you have shared with me that kind of gives a general guideline for parents on what to do with the kids in the course of the day. So as you move up beyond first or second grade. So let's talk about second graders, elementary school kids. Does the schedule that you are suggesting, does that really change that much? Or what does change as kids are older in terms of how you're educating them?
I mean, obviously they have hopefully a longer attention span and they'll stick with certain activities for longer, and they'll probably be a little bit more self-motivated and a little bit more into, you know, they might tell you what should be done based on their experience at school. Like, you're going to hear a lot of, well, my teacher, does this. And that's fine and good. But again, I think the more you can get away from trying to create a school in your home and just create like a really positive learning environment, I think, yes, having a plan, having a schedule that we're going to, have available for you, but just really allowing them, a type of homeschooling that's called delight directed learning. And, this is the time to embrace that. If your child has always had an interest in dinosaurs, do a unit study on dinosaurs, look things up on the internet, make, crafts and activities all focused around whatever your child's interest is. I think this is the time that you can really take advantage of this.
That makes so much sense. I want to thank everybody who's watching live with us. Maria says she's got kids of all ages and grades. It's very important to have organization and a routine. Jessica is suggesting that Mystery Science is a fun science resource that you can do with your kiddos. Maria says that she's been homeschooling for 12 years and has 6 kids, and being organized and scheduled is important for you as a coach and a teacher. I do want to address that because I think naturally when the kids are younger, the parent is the teacher, but there is kind of a different role that you step into if you're trying to play teacher, but also still be parent. So how do you balance that? Like, do you start the morning by making sure that you connect and have cuddle time if they're younger, or just connect in a way where you're not quite stepping into that teacher role yet? What are your suggestions on that issue?
Yeah, I think in general, I would just stay as far away from the teacher role as possible at all times. I mean, I really think this is just about being a mom. As parents, we all teach our kids. It's not just homeschooling parents that teach their kids. You teach your kids every day. And I think that your kids are going to think it's a little strange if you start acting differently to them. So I just continue to be the parent and the coach that you always are, and nurturing your kids. And I think it's important to have a lot of empathy for our kids. I mean, I think we're all like, what in the world, is going on with this pandemic, and how our lives and our business is going to be affected. And we think that we carry all the stress. But I think it's really important that we recognize our kids are really facing their own set of uncertainties, and just be empathetic and listen well. And we all need to give each other a lot of grace and patience.
That is wise and sage advice. I want to go back to something that you just mentioned about fostering the interest that your kid may already have in a topic. As you go to decide what you're going to be learning on a given day, how much choice or direction should you give your child in terms of what they're going to learn that day? Like, how different, I guess what I'm asking is, in normal school, every day they do reading, they do math, they might do social science, social studies. They have a pretty regimented schedule. In the next several weeks, is the more practical way to approach it as, hey, today we're going to be doing all about science, and this is the topic that you're interested in, so we're going to dive deep into it, and you might save other topics for a different day?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that, again, it depends on what your school is telling you. Our schools have not given us any requirements at all with our children during this time. I always do say to other moms that I talk to just about homeschooling in general that the most important thing is to never get behind in math. So if that's something that your child struggles with, yes, like going over your, addition facts or whatever to be keeping up on would be a really good idea, just so they don't, forget and feel kind of behind when they get back to school.
Interesting. And then, like, as you go to approach the so-called lesson plans for the day, should you offer your child choices in terms of what they will be studying during that day?
I think, I have a favorite saying for parenting in general, which is your child is ready for choice when they can accept no choice at all. And that goes for, 3-year-olds who struggle with having to wear certain clothes at certain times. They earn those freedoms. So I think as long as everybody is, doing their chores, getting along, meeting the general expectations, that earns them a lot of freedom. But as the parent, you need to be able to, say, no, this is what we're going to do today. We need to get this done or whatever, and have them be okay with that.
That's fascinating. And what do you do? I mean, I'm sure among your 9 kids, there must have been 1 or 2 in there who were particularly strong-willed. Like, when I think about sitting down to homeschool, my girls are really pretty stubborn when it comes to certain topics.
Yeah.
And
and
what do you do with the strong-willed kid?
Yeah. that's something I definitely wanted to make sure we talked about today is that you really want to recognize from the very beginning that this is not going to be easy. It's a big change. I talk to a lot of parents, and other times that are they're pulling their kids out of public school or private school or whatever to homeschool them. And I tell them, that first month is just going to be difficult. Your child's going to have expectations of what school was like, and then things are not going to be the same. You're going to have to stop a lot and talk about character issues like kindness and self-control and obedience. And you don't want to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm like wasting my time. I'm not getting to the actual academic subject, and realize that's okay. Like, you are actually dealing with the most important thing, because we want our children to have strong character. And so just give a lot of grace and patience to yourself, and with the expectations that it's not going to be easy.
I like that. In terms of the space in the home, does it matter where you're doing the academic work? Like, should you try to set aside a special space to do this and dedicate that toward, the emergency homeschooling? Or does it make a difference if you're just doing it at the kitchen table?
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to have, anything different than you would normally have for your kids where they do their homework. I just find all of my kids are different, and then they go through different stages with what they like to do and where they feel most comfortable doing their work. So when I always say when I homeschooled, I know I still am, but it's been a while since I've really been in the trenches. Like, my favorite thing to do was to take one child at a time and go sit on my bed and make a cup of tea and do, a lesson with them where it was just the two of us by ourselves. And I know not everybody has that luxury, because, oh my goodness, I'm by myself in the house and the dog is like about to break something. Um, um,
Fantastic.
so it's whatever works for you. Like, for me, I just love to feel cozy and homey, and not like, a cold, sterile environment just because we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense too. Can we talk about the older kids? I know that you said, as the kids get older, their attention span will improve. But, there's a lot of parents that have middle school and high school kids at home right now. I know that our 17-year-old is,
No,
what's that?
sorry, we have our college students home, as well.
Yeah, maybe they can do some of the teaching. But what are your suggestions for the parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers? Like our 17-year-old is doing digital learning via her iPad, I guess, from the teachers at school. But are there things that you can do as a parent to support the learning for middle schoolers and high schoolers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, earlier you kind of suggested that maybe like there's going to be some difficulties with like attention span, and just maybe not even wanting to do the work. And I think it's super important to have, motivating factors for your kids, and kind of part of your day and your planning, like, well, we're not going to do this until this gets done. And realizing that's always going to have to be revamped, like, the worst thing we can do is come up with this really, amazing plan, and then it doesn't work as well as we want it to, and then not be flexible. Like, the worst thing we can do as a mom is just be like really stubborn and like, so just make your plans and be willing to flex with them. But definitely, like, chore charts, motivational charts. I found that just doing something new was always really exciting. It may only last for like a week, and then you may have to do something different the next week, but always have those, rewards, I guess I'm trying to say.
That's interesting. And I've read too that, with kids of all ages, I'm not much of a baker, but something I saw was like, okay, start baking with your kids because that is a way to teach them math. Do you believe in
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Yeah. Again, I really feel like this is an opportunity we have. I mean, all this time that we're going to have at home to spend time doing things with our kids that we don't normally have the time for. And not only that, but you might learn something new, and they might learn something new about themselves. Like, say someone really realized, wow, I have an interest in baking, and then kind of let them, roll with that. And maybe if they are interested in cooking, ask them if they'd like to make dinner one night, things that we wouldn't normally do. It's a really great opportunity for growth and finding new interests.
Yeah, that is the silver lining in this. I totally agree. I felt it just this weekend with the time that we were able to spend together. I guess it could be things as simple as gardening. And okay, it's springtime, even though it snowed here just recently on Saturday. But, we can start thinking about the garden and talking about photosynthesis and, how do seeds become flowers? And obviously, I'm not, the font of all knowledge for these things, but that's what the internet is for, so that I can feel like I actually am spouting facts to the kids instead of just making things out of thin air.
For sure.
So, what are the mistakes that you would recommend people avoid? Like, what are the things that you've learned along the way, anecdotally or by experience, that you want to caution people against?
Yes. I would say the number one mistake would be to wake up at the same time as your children because starting your day like that just never goes well for me. I know that I need supernatural help, and I think we all need it even more during these difficult times that we're having. So I seriously like get up at 5 a.m. just so I can have my coffee, read my Bible, pray, plan, exercise, just feel like a sane and happy person by the time my kids roll out of bed. And so I would say, like, number one is taking care of yourself in those ways, and just being a happy mom. We're going through a really hard time. We don't want to pass on our stress to our kids. So, give your stress to God before the day even starts, and you will be amazed at how He takes care of you.
I know that you are passionate about your faith, and that's actually a big part of why you homeschool. I know a lot of people that is the reason that they homeschool as well. And I just do think it's interesting in general that homeschooling has taken on a whole different beast. I think when I was little, I saw homeschooling as weird. Like, I just didn't understand it. And I always wondered socially if, homeschooling would slow the social growth of the kids who were at home all the time just with their family. But I think that the nature of homeschooling has changed over the years. The way that you homeschool does lend itself to building up your kids' social skills as well, because they're not always just home, right?
Right. Although now we are.
Although right now we are, yes.
Yeah, no, my kids have always been involved in their local sports, youth groups at church. Even, Oregon law actually allows you to take part in whatever amount of public school you want to. So my daughter did choir at an elementary school when she was that age. So yeah, they've always been very socially involved. In fact, there's so many opportunities for homeschoolers right now that it's sometimes hard just to actually stay home and do your academic work.
I want to say hi to Rose, who is watching on Facebook, and Stephen, who's chiming in saying that you are spot on. It is a big change for the kids. Thanks for chiming in there, and want to say hi to Ton as well. As far as academic requirements, and this is more of a long range thing, not, this current situation we're in. When it comes to homeschooling, do kids have to meet certain benchmarks with the state? Like, are there mandatory testing requirements for kids who are homeschooled that they need to pass the same way that everyday school kids do?
Yes, they take a standardized state test in, I believe, and now it's been a while, but I think it's third, fifth, eighth, and 10th grade.
Okay.
And it was, yeah, just covering both, mostly like, math and reading comprehension.
Interesting. So even like as a homeschooling parent, and you can discuss with your kid, like, these are the different subjects that the state requires that you need to master before these different time periods.
Right. I remember being really nervous when my first child went to high school, and then so relieved that she did fine. But at that point, I realized, really what you need to focus on is math, reading, and writing, because any class they take in school is always taught from the beginning without, any expectation of something course that they would have had before when it comes to things like science and history. And we did those things. Actually, history was like one of my passions, but it's just good to know that, you really just want to focus on the basics to get them ready.
And did your kids struggle at all socially once they made that adjustment from homeschooling to going to a public school?
No, not at all. They actually, sometimes it's kind of nice. They've started the first couple started in the ninth grade, then all the rest have started in eighth grade. And I think it's kind of like, with social media and sports and church and different things, kids kind of know about them, even if they don't know them. And they've always kind of been treated like, fresh blood, like somebody new. And they've all had really positive experiences.
That's awesome. Any other advice that you would share that you want to make sure that you impart to us before we close up?
Yeah, let me just make sure. I did make a couple of notes. I just think practicing thankfulness for all of us during this time, when you sit around the dinner table at night or breakfast or whenever you have something like that, just to really go around and talk about something that you're thankful for. Maybe even specifically because our schedule is different. What can you be thankful for about that? I think being happy as a mom is going to go a long way for your kids. And like I talked about, what helps me is getting up early. But if you're not doing well, even just faking a smile actually sends like happy hormones in your body and can make you feel a little bit better. Sometimes if I'm really struggling in a situation, just like pretend that somebody else is watching you and that you're on TV and just like, how would you handle this situation? Because it's a long day, when you're there with your kids all day. And I do think that everybody needs to have an afternoon quiet time. When your kids don't nap anymore, they can still have, quiet time. Oh, and another thing, no one probably really wants to hear this, but I will say, and maybe this, you can make an exception for this quarantine period, but in general, when my kids and my boys specifically were under the age of like 11, I found that if I let them play and have screen time every day, that all they did was fixate on that. It was like, when is screen time? When is screen time? When is screen time? And then when I stopped doing that and I only let them play on the weekends, it was like they forgot about it, because like for kids, a day is like an eternity. And so it's like, gee, I'm not going to be able to play till Saturday. It's like they just kind of put it out of their mind. And then once they get a little older, 11, 12, I don't feel like it's so much of an issue. But I just thought I'd throw that out there because that used to drive me crazy. And when we just got rid of it during the weekdays, it got so much better.
That is a great suggestion. I think a lot of people will struggle with that. We've tried it in various spurts here or there to go with that model of no screen time until the weekend, specifically like, the iPads or the tablets and whatnot. And I think you're right. I think when we've gone cold turkey, they do eventually like stop asking for it. And you're right, they kind of forget about it, and then it really does become a treat on the weekends. I think we've probably, in all reality, let that slide right now with all this time at home and whatnot. So I think people will have to figure out for themselves what works, or maybe what time period of the day to use that screen time. But I think we all know, based on the studies with screen time, especially with the younger kids, how it's essentially rewiring their brains and not particularly great for long stretches of time. Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing your insight. Thanks for everybody who tuned in today. And as promised, Heather will share her list of resources, her favorites, for us to share with you, and we'll include that in the tip sheet on this episode. And thank you for joining us for this episode of That Expert Show. You can always go back and watch the episode on our website, thatexpertshow.com. If it's easier for you, you can also watch our YouTube channel that has all of our episodes as well. And we also put our shows out as a podcast. So Apple iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, all those good places. You can just, download the podcast, subscribe to it, and take in the content that way. I invite you to connect with me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find me there at Anna Canzano. I always welcome your feedback, your comments, your questions, and I love your ideas on the type of topics that we should cover and the guests that we should invite to be on the show. And, I love the conversation. I love that this is a two-way street, and I love your input on the show. If you happened to like this or subscribe to it or share our show with a friend, that helps others find us. So thanks for being part of That Expert Show, where you help run the show.